Hey, welcome everybody to Convocation. We're so glad that you're here. Before we get started today, I just have a few reminders. Some of you, most of you, have actually completed the orientation survey, so thank you very much. We really appreciate it. We've been able to kind of keep up with those. For those of you who have not, you still have time to do that. I believe that the orientation survey will remain open until the 19th of September. So please make sure that you log in to your Canvas account and complete that orientation survey. Once again, the requirements for Convocation to pass the class, because remember, this is just a pass-fail class. You have to do all the requirements, you pass, and it's great, okay? You need to attend 10 of the 12 presentations. Yes. So the first presentation is today. And every Thursday, except for Thanksgiving, there'll be a presentation. You need to attend 10 of those, and then complete the response. Okay, that will open up following the presentation. You need to complete that response to the presentation by the following Sunday. They're really easy responses. Okay, mainly they ask you to rate the presentation that you attended, and then to consider any questions or ideas or anything that you would like, maybe a question you'd like to ask the presenter, all right? My TAs and I go through those, we look at them, and then we pass along your questions to the presenters. So that's really the big requirement, right? 10 presentations and 10 responses. Then you have 3 cultural events you need to attend. There is a cultural event calendar on Canvas. If you go to the home page for our class and you go underneath the heading that says additional course information, there is a calendar, or a cultural events calendar, that you can click on that link and it will take you to an updated list of approved activities. Some of you have already come to ask me about activities that you're planning on attending off campus to see if they will be approved, and thank you for doing that, because that's what you're supposed to do. If you're going to attend something off campus, please come and talk with me, or you can email me and ask me if it would be appropriate. Remember that there are 3 categories, so you need to go to 1 event in each category. We hope you'll go to more than just 1 in each category, but only 1 category, or only 1 event in each category counts. After you go to that event, you need to fill out the survey about that particular category, about that event, in Canvas before the end of the semester. The questions on those have to do with, what event did you attend, what was the date of the event, and then we'll ask you a few response, like your own response to those particular events.
I'll take this.
All right.
Yeah, just because
Also, you need to meet with me once outside of class during the semester. I've already met with, I think, about 14 or 15 of you so far, so that's great. It's been wonderful to meet with you and talk with you. You guys are delightful. And then finally, at the end of the semester, there is a final survey on Convocation. This is not the course evaluation that you get through a different portal. This is actually on Canvas, so we need to complete that. All right? Any questions, really quick questions about those requirements? Okay. Well, thank you so much for coming today. I'd like to introduce our speaker to you. Today, Carson Howell will speak to us, and he currently serves as the Vice President of Finance and Administrative Services here at Snow College. He grew up in Sugar City, Idaho, and graduated with an associate's degree in biology education from then Ricks College in nearby Rexburg. He completed his bachelor's degree in microbiology from Boise State University. After the events of 9/11 and an internship in the Idaho Governor's office, he changed his field of study and earned a Master of Public Administration degree from the Maxwell School of Citizenship and Public Affairs at Syracuse University. He returned to Boise State University to complete his PhD in Public Policy and Administration. Carson has worked for the Arizona legislature, the Utah Governor's office, the Utah System of Higher Education, and the Idaho State Board of Education. He and his wife, Michelle, who joins him today, have 5 wonderful children, and they love being here at Snow College. Please join me in welcoming Carson Howell to our convocation.
Thank you. This is a big, wide open stage. I feel there's not much going on up here. Well, thank you, and I also want to clarify something that Dr. Bredrero said, that the questions get forwarded to me that you may ask, but not the rating of the presentation, so you can be honest in your on your evaluation there. I won't ever see it. Let me see if I can get on here and open this up. Oh, is there a password for it? Oh, okay. Okay, we're in business. All right, can everybody see that then? Okay, I can see a glow coming from that side, so I think it's on. Yes, as was mentioned, I grew up in Sugar City, Idaho, and I'm the youngest of 5 children. You can see here on the left, it's a nice family picture of when I was growing up. There were the 2 older boys, then my sister in the middle, and then the 2 younger boys. And it wasn't until I started putting this presentation together that I realized it was all the girls and me dressed in red in this photo. The boys, the older boys, are in suits, and then my brother, who is just older than me, is in those sweet pants that you see there on the left. Since my sister was in the middle and we were kind of split with the older boys and the younger boys, it was always me and Brady. So Brady's my brother that's just older than me. So you can see we had our pictures together. When we were younger, we decided what we wanted to be when we grew up. And instead of things like a firefighter or an astronaut, Brady and I decided that we wanted to grow up and be dinosaurs. So we drew pictures of the dinosaurs that we were going to be when we grew up. He was going to be the Triceratops, and I was the T-Rex. And I guess I am hitting that dinosaur. I will get to that stage eventually, so I guess we will hit our goal. But Brady and I did a lot together, and we did a lot of things. We loved Star Wars. We played with our Star Wars toys. We played G.I. Joes with our action figures. Usually ended up with me crying in tears because Brady was a cheater, and his guys always had shields and mine did not, and it never worked out well for me. We played Risk, the board game, which also ended up with me in tears and crying to my mom because Brady would annihilate me. It was a great time, though. Great time growing up. And I wanted to be like Brady. So in that Halloween picture there, it's my sister and the 2 of us. Brady was a shadow for Halloween. So he dressed all in black. I also wanted to dress all in black, but I didn't have a shadow costume. So at the urging of my sister, I was a witch, complete with the green face paint and the pointy hat, but I was still dressed all in black. So it was okay. I think my sister wanted a little sister. And apparently from that first family photo, I think my mom, I know that I was expected to be a girl, but well, that closeness continued through high school. Brady and I were in plays together. We did theater together. We ran track together. We were in the show choir together. And Brady was a senior. I was a freshman. But it was great because he would let me hang out with his friends, and I got to be with the cool seniors. So it was a lot of fun. And we were very close. In fact, I was the best man at Brady's wedding. So this is a picture when Brady got married. And then after he got married, he went to Utah State University studying political science, and then he went on to Syracuse as well and got his Master's of Public Administration. I went to Boise State, and after, I'm glad that Michelle is here, after a whirlwind romance that we still haven't shared the timeline with our kids, we were married, and Brady was there for my wedding. He came back from his internship, which I'll talk a little bit about. My parents were actually serving a religious mission, and so since they were gone, we actually went there where they were at and got married. But so we didn't have our regular reception. That was going to be postponed for a different time, a later time when they were done with their mission, and then we would go back and have a reception. So Brady, after completion of his master's degree, he was selected as a presidential management intern, which is now it's the Presidential Management Fellowship Program. And it's for aspiring public servants, so people who want to work in government after their graduate degree. They apply for this program, and if they're selected, then they go through the first selection, they get interviewed by different departments, and then those departments can select, those agencies can select who they want. Brady was actually selected as the very first presidential management intern with the Office of Naval Intelligence. And so he had just completed his master's degree, he was working on his top secret clearance, and he got this internship with the Navy, with Naval Intelligence, and they rotate you into different assignments about every 6 months. And so his first assignment was at the Pentagon. So my parents were finished up their religious mission, and so we were all getting back together back in Idaho for their welcome home celebration and also for our wedding reception. And that was scheduled to be September 15th and 16th, so that weekend. And Brady was flying home on the 13th. So first of all, before we get started on this next part, how many of you, by raise of hand, how many of you were alive on September 11th, 2001? Okay, all right. How many of you remember September 11th, 2001? Okay, a smaller number. Okay, so it was a Tuesday morning, and again, Brady was planning on flying home just a couple days later on Thursday. So at 8:46 in the morning that day, American Airlines Flight 11 crashed into the North Tower. Now, in talking about this, and what I want you to think about is we can now look back on it, and most of you know about September 11th, most of you know about the different planes that were hijacked. I want you to consider what it was like that day. At 8:46 a.m., this plane crashes into the North Tower. Information is pretty sketchy at first. We don't know. We knew that a plane had hit the tower. We didn't know what size of plane had hit the tower. We didn't know why the plane had hit the tower. And so everybody's just kind of wondering, well, there's the North Tower is on fire. What is going on? At about 15 minutes later, a second plane crashes into the South Tower. So the news was reporting on the plane that hit the first tower. And so the cameras are on, watching the first tower, the smoke coming out of it, that it's on fire, talking about, well, we don't know what happened, we don't know what size of a plane. As the cameras are rolling, we see the second plane hit the South Tower. And we watched this live. And only then did we start to suspect that something is really going on. We had no idea at this point. Then at 9:37, so a little less than an hour after the first plane hits the first tower, American Airlines Flight 77 crashes into the Pentagon. And At this point, we don't know when it will end. We don't know what's going on. We don't know how many planes are targeting sites. We don't know if it's only planes. There's a lot of information that we just don't know. We're just watching this happen. And because of the news cycle and the media, we're watching all of this unfold live on TV. And they don't know what's going on, and so they're just talking, and they keep saying, well, a plane has hit the tower, and they keep showing the images over and over of the different planes crashing into the tower, of the Pentagon on fire. And so that's what we see, just over and over. At 9:59, so almost an hour after the first attack, as we're watching both towers burn, we watch as the South Tower collapses in 10 seconds. It takes 10 seconds for this skyscraper to crash completely to the ground. And since we had been watching live on TV, we'd seen emergency personnel trying to evacuate people out of the tower. We'd seen firefighters run into the tower. We'd seen police go into the tower. And then we watch it live as this tower comes crashing down, and we know that all the people in that tower are dead. We continue to watch live as now the people in the North Tower, there's more urgency to try and get out. And there are people there as we're watching who are trying to make the decision of, are they going to stay in the tower and potentially burn or get crushed to death, or something else. And so as we're watching and the cameras are rolling, you see people jumping out of the tower, out of the skyscraper onto the street below, to certain death below. And we're watching all of this live on TV. Then there are reports coming out from the news of multiple planes being hijacked. There are reports about bombs on bridges. There are reports that different sites have been hit. We've heard that the White House had been hit. We heard that the Capitol had been hit, that the Washington Monument had been hit. And then people are trying to dispel those at the time, saying, no, here's a picture of the White House, it's still intact. It is just, it's crazy. We have no idea what's going on. And then we hear about this plane that went down in Shanksville, Pennsylvania. So then we're all trying to make sense of that. Well, why did this plane go down in an empty field in Pennsylvania, in rural Pennsylvania? Why would they choose that site if they targeted that one? Or was it just a plane malfunction and that plane just crashed into the ground for some other unknown reason? Every little thing that happened, there was questioning, is this tied to the attacks on the towers? And we didn't know at the time. And then, almost an hour and 45 minutes after the first attack, we watch as the second tower collapses. So in a matter of about 2 hours, we've seen about 3,000 people die, and we watched it all live on TV. The aftermath of it, all the planes are grounded in the whole country. You walk outside and there isn't a single plane in the air. It was very strange. If you were in a more urban area, you don't hear any planes in the sky. You don't see anything. It was really, really strange. The only aircraft in the skies at all are US fighter jets that are patrolling the skies. So if you think about that, we had the American Air Force flying jets, armed jets, around in US airspace, prepared to shoot down any passenger jet or anything that was flying other than other military aircraft. The people, especially in New York, where the buildings had collapsed, the towers had collapsed, they're just walking around. They don't know where to go. They don't know what is next. They don't know if there will be something next. They don't know where it would be safe. They don't know where their loved ones are. Years later, I talked to a friend who worked in New York at the time, and he was down there at Ground Zero, and he said nothing would have surprised us at that point. He said if jets came through and started shooting at people, or if tanks rolled through, it wouldn't have surprised us. It was terror, and we hadn't experienced that in this country, like we were seeing then. I want to read an excerpt of a letter that I wrote to Brady. This was 8 months after 9/11. It says, I awoke that morning early so that I could take Michelle to work. I briefly heard on the radio that one plane had hit the World Trade Center. I figured that it was an accident and that I could read about it in the paper if I ever heard much about it. I dropped Michelle off at work and kissed her goodbye. I turned around and drove to my early morning bacteriology class. On my way to school, my cell phone rang. It was Michelle. She asked me if I had heard about the plane that hit the World Trade Center. I told her that I had briefly heard them say it on the radio. It was then that I learned it was a large plane. I was surprised and thanked her for the news. It wasn't a mile later that she called back to tell me that a plane had struck the Pentagon. Don't be worried, I'm sure Brady's all right, she told me. I told her that I wasn't worried, which I wasn't, and that I too was sure that you were fine. For those of you who have not seen the Pentagon, it is huge. There's about 17 and a half miles of hallway in the building. So the likelihood, and when you saw the pictures of the Pentagon, it was pretty small. The likelihood of it being targeted right where Brady was pretty small. It wasn't until I got to school that reality started sinking in. Michelle called me again and said, I think you should call Brady. I tried, but I couldn't get through. I figured that I would try a little later. I went back up to my classroom and waited for my professor to arrive. When he arrived, we learned that a second plane had hit the World Trade Center. My professor was shocked, and we just talked about the happenings and the tragedy that was unfolding. Finally, my teacher said, is everyone all right? It was then that I arose and started to walk out. With tears in my eyes, I looked at my teacher, shook my head, and quietly, with a breaking voice, said, my brother works in the Pentagon. I called again and left a message on your answering machine. No sooner had I done so than Michelle called me again to tell me that one of the World Trade Center towers had collapsed. I told her that you weren't at home and we decided that you were undoubtedly caught up with the happenings. I returned to class and gave everyone an update. My teacher asked me if I had contacted you. I told him that I hadn't yet. He began to teach when my cell phone rang again. He immediately stopped and looked at me with eyes full of hope. It was Michelle. She had called to tell me that the second tower had collapsed. When I relayed the message to my class, my teacher let out a sigh and told us to take a break until lab. I walked with my professor and we talked as we made our way to the Science and Nursing building. On the second floor where the lab was located, television was pulled out into the hallway so that the students could watch. It was there that I caught the first images of the terrible damage that was done. The next, this slide contains a video with some of the sights and sounds and radio transmissions and phone calls that happened that day. So the language can be a little rough. There are no F-bombs in it, but the images can be a little upsetting. So if you desire to step out, that's fine. The video lasts about 5 minutes.
I'm calling from the plane. Want to tell you I love you. Please tell my children that I love them very much. And I'm so sorry, babe. I hope to be able to see your face again, baby. I love you. Bye.
Number 56865. We have, I believe it is a Boeing 757. Can you see him up there, sir?
That's confirmed. It looks like he's rocking his wings.
Roger.
He's rocking back and forth.
Number 56865, I advise you stay away from that aircraft. Go north as fast as you can.
United 93, have you got information on that yet?
Yeah, he's down.
He's down?
Yes.
When did he land?
He did not land.
Oh, he's down?
Yeah,
Bound?
somewhere up northeast of Camp David.
Sean, it's me. I just want to let you know I love you, and I'm stuck at this building in New York. There's lots of smoke, and I just wanted you to know that I love you always.
At number 2 World Trade Center, right. Lady was stewardess in the office. We're not ready to die, but it's getting bad.
I'm gonna die, aren't I? No. Say I'm gonna die. Ma'am, say your prayers. We're gonna think positive because you gotta help each other get off the floor. I'm now. Die.
That's a new type of war. That's what it is.
So Brady was officially listed as missing a few days later, and then he was officially identified on the 17th, on September 17th. So for 6 days, we didn't exactly know what had happened. We called hospitals to find out if he had been admitted. We didn't know if he was he still alive in the building? Was he in a coma? He had recently received his top secret clearance, and I knew that he had applied at the CIA. Was he off doing something else and wasn't able to contact us? Where was he? Was he okay? We didn't know any of that for 6 days. And then we received that confirmation. I took about a week off of work from where I was working, and I came back about a week later, and logged onto my computer, and there was an email from Brady that morning, right before the attacks had hit, talking about the times that we were going to get together when he came and visited, when he flew home on Thursday. About a year after the attack, I received an internship with the governor of Idaho, and I absolutely loved it. I decided I didn't want to be in a biology lab the rest of my life, and unfortunately I didn't know that COVID was going to happen. I could have been quite popular had I stayed in bacteriology and virology, but I ended up changing and went to Syracuse and got my MPA, and then I got a PhD in public policy and administration from Boise State. And so my academic career, since that bachelor's degree, I had really focused on this American experiment, and I believed in the American experiment. I believed in that dream. And I do believe in that dream. And I believe that those rights that are afforded to us in the Constitution and in the Bill of Rights, that those apply to all people. But I wasn't aware that belief was going to be challenged the way that it was. In March of 2017, I visited Guantanamo Bay for a week, and I was there to watch the pretrial proceedings of Khalid Sheikh Mohammed and 4 others who were identified and accused of planning and funding the attack on September 11th. So this is drawing since cameras aren't allowed in the courtroom, and this is not my drawing. I definitely don't have this ability. But there's a couple things in this drawing that I want to point out. You can see the 5 individuals there. Khalid Sheikh Mohammed is in the front, and then the other 4, and I can't remember which one is in which seat. But they each have their own table. And so the table is their defense team. And they're on the left side of the courtroom. If you're looking from the back, they're on the left side of the courtroom. The prosecution team is on the right. And they each have their list of, or their defense team with them on that table. On the, kind of in the back of that drawing, you can see people sitting along the wall. And those are soldiers. Each inmate there, each person that's being accused and tried, has 2 soldiers that watch them constantly. And when it's prayer time, they will break the court proceedings, and those 5 men will kneel and pray, and one soldier watches them, and the other soldier has his back to them watching everybody else. It's really hard to see, but in the very, very back of that, it's in the top left corner of that photo, or of that drawing, you can see some people sitting back behind a wall. There's a pane of glass there, of soundproof glass, and that is where the families sit who go and watch these pretrial proceedings. And it's on a 40-second delay. So you're watching the pretrial proceedings, you're watching the things happen, and then the video feed and the audio feed into that room is 40 seconds behind. And that's so that if there's any classified information that is revealed by anybody in the courtroom, that they can dump the feed, and it doesn't go back to the families. But as part of my time there, after we would go to court 8 to 5, and about on Wednesday or Thursday, that evening, I met with the defense teams of those 5 men. And so I had some time to prepare myself as I met with the defense team. And I asked myself, how much do I believe in America and in the ideals and the things that I've studied, the things that I've made my academic career out of? Do I still believe that everybody, including those who have not shown remorse for what they did or have said that they would do it again if they had the chance, do I still believe that they should be given the right to a vigorous defense? How deep does my conviction in this American experiment run? And could I set aside all the pain and fear and the loss that I felt to say that the rights still apply to those people, to those 5 individuals, specifically of somebody who hurt me so deeply and so personally? So I met with the defense team, and they have private lawyers, and then they also have military lawyers. It is a military court that they're in. And so there are members of the U.S. military who are defending those 5 individuals. Many of them, as I talked with them, well, I guess not many, but some of them had joined the military based on the events of 9/11. And now they find themselves defending those individuals in court. So it was a very, it was a tough experience, but one that I am appreciative for the self-reflection that it gave me. I had studied for years on public administration, government, the rights, and do I believe it now that it's put to the test? As I met with the defense team, I thanked them for what they did. I thanked them for doing their duty and providing those same rights to everybody. And one of the military attorneys started to cry. And he said, I go home to the mainland, because this is in Cuba. He said, I go home to the mainland and I wear my uniform and I'm in the store and people stop me and say, thank you for your service. And he said, I question whether they would thank me if they really knew what I was doing. He said when he got that assignment, he and his wife cried about it and they talked about it. And he said, I don't know if I can do this. He said, it has been so hard. But I love my brother. And I love this country, and I believe in what it stands for. And so did Brady. Prior to 9/11, we as a country had gone through a pretty bitter election in the 2000. Bush-Gore, it was extremely close. That's where you hear all the things about Florida and the hanging chads. That's all from the 2000 election. It was a mess. And there were a lot of people who were really upset about that, even up to that point. However, September 12th was an interesting view of America. It was a day of mourning, and it was a day of unity. We were united. Despite the grief and the personal feelings of hopelessness that I felt of not knowing where Brady was or if he was okay, but there was hope in the country, and there was hope for the country. We recognized, even despite the bitterness that we had just finished with the election, Democrats were not the enemy, Republicans were not the enemy. It was hate and intolerance that were the enemy. After Boise State, I went to Syracuse, and that's where I started this journey of my American journey after 9/11, was really with that finding out what America meant to me. It was confirmed to me in that Cuban courtroom that I still believe in the American experiment and that I have hope in that experiment. We are far from perfect, especially I think you can look at tensions today, and it's every bit as bitter as it was after that 2000 election, maybe more. But we have to continue to march forward with those principles. At Syracuse University in the Maxwell School, there's this statue of George Washington. And he stands in front of the oath of citizenship for the Athenian city-state. And when you graduate from the Maxwell School, you take that oath. That's part of the graduation. And I want to read what that says. It says, "We will ever strive for the ideals and sacred things of the city, both alone and with many. We will unceasingly seek to quicken the sense of public duty. We will revere and obey the city's laws. We will transmit this city not only not less, but greater, better, and more beautiful than it was transmitted to us." And I would challenge you this day to take that same oath, to join that great effort of democracy. It's fulfilling, it's satisfying, and to be that hope. You can ask yourself, as the Athenians had to do when they took this oath, how to become a better citizen. Don't let yourself be brought down by or caught up in the rhetoric. Instead of fighting against each other, we can work together and build up rather than tear down. And we need to root out that hate and intolerance. And you all are the hope. You can dedicate yourself to the ideals and principles of America and democracy. So I would encourage you to personally, you don't have to stand up and raise your arm. We did that, but you don't have to. But take that oath and commit yourself to transmit your cities and your states and your nation and this college, not only not less, but greater, better, and more beautiful than it was transmitted to you. So with that, I'd be happy to answer any questions that you have.
Thank you so much for joining us, Carson. Are there any questions? Both Aubrey and I have microphones if anybody would like to ask a question.
I know we started off the semester with a really light topic. Sorry about that.
First of all, just thank you for sharing the story. For those of us who remember, it brings back a lot of emotions, and I know you have got a special connection to what happened. When I think about the attacks, I think about the 3,000 Americans, but then 20 years later, I think about like Muslim Americans who are unfairly targeted and persecuted. I think about service members in the military and families who've had to sacrifice so much, Afghan civilians. Could you say a little bit more about how your thoughts are about how this has continued to be something that's required or caused sacrifice for a lot of people?
Yeah, thank you. It has. And it was interesting where I was working at the time when 9/11 happened. I was working in food manufacturing, worked at a Nestle plant. And there were quite a few people who were immigrants from Bosnia, Albania, and they were Muslims. And they knew my connection there, and they came up and talked to me, and they said, "We are so sorry. This is not what we believe." And that was really hard on them. They did feel targeted. And again, going back, it wasn't groups of people that were the enemy. It was that hate and intolerance that were the enemy. And it was interesting. Right before I came to Snow, as we were leaving, we were in Boise, and I was leaving Boise to take this position here at Snow. The very last person that I saw was one of the Albanian people there from the plant. His name was Mohammed. We called him Muyo. But Muyo was the last person that I saw before I came. And he came and gave me a hug, and we talked, and it was great to see him. But there is that, we have to be careful about how we view people. And at that time, after 9/11, there was a lot of distrust of Muslim Americans, of Muslims, of people of the Islamic faith. And it was really sad. People felt justified in what they were doing. And again, going back to, no, these rights are afforded to all people. And we look at what's going on in Afghanistan and the refugees. It's been tough. It's been tough for them. Ironically, when we moved here to Sanpete County, we sold our home to a family of Afghans. That's who bought our home, and they had come to try and escape the war over there. And my wife and I have talked about it. I wonder how they feel in that neighborhood. We were surrounded by older veterans of the war, and I hope that they were accepted there. But we do need to be careful about how we view others and how we treat others.
Other questions?
Oh, I think there's one up here. Yeah, go ahead.
But I want everybody to hear your
okay.
question, so that's all. Thank you.
Do you think that we will ever go back to hating the hatred and the terror that was caused by that, but not the actual people? So we would actually bond together and fight against that feeling and the terror rather than each other.
I sure hope so. And that's where I think that you all play a role in that. To not be caught up in the rhetoric, in the things that are posted in social media. there is a lot of hatred out there, and it's finger pointing of this is the enemy, this is who has hurt me, this is who I have to blame for my situation in life. I do hope that we can get to that point where we look at terrorism and that hatred and intolerance, that's the enemy. But we need everybody's help in that. And so that's where I would encourage you, be that hope. If you have a desire, run for office, run for public office. In the 2020 election, for state and federal offices, 30% of those elections went unopposed. So you think about that. 30% of those elections in state and federal office, there was only one choice. And when you only have one choice, it's not always the best choice. So if you have that desire, run for office. And we need that help, we need that leadership to get us to that point where that is what we focus on. That's what we can come together and fight.
Thank you. Any final question? We have time for maybe one more question.
Thank you for sharing your story of your brother. I just have a quick question. Do you know what Brady was doing that morning, why he was there? Was that his office? Was he assigned to that area or just happened to be there?
Yeah, so he was part of the, there was an early morning group that would get together and they would prepare the briefing for the Director of Naval Intelligence. And they would share what was going on in the world, what are the things that he should be aware of, and then they would prepare that and present it to him. And so he went to work early in the morning. It was 3 or 4 in the morning that he would get to work. They had prepared the briefing. They were ready to present it to him when the first plane hit in New York. And so they pulled the team back into the room and said, okay, we need to get together, we need to revise the report, because what is going on now? And so they were looking at all the chatter that they could find, all the intelligence reports. So they were pulled back into a room. The Pentagon has 5 rings as well as 5 sides. When the plane hit, it hit the ring it hit the side that Brady was working on, but he was a couple rings in. And so when the plane hit, he was in this room with his team there, preparing that briefing and talking about what they needed to adjust. And it was the pressure, the force of the impact that killed him. Later, we found out when his body was identified that they went into that room and they said that it was kind of a still of life. They said there was this person who was sitting over here. There was that person that was over at this desk. They said you could picture how that meeting was unfolding in that room. So he and his team, they died instantly. They were not burned. His body was actually in pretty good shape. But yeah, he was there working, preparing to tell the Director of Naval Intelligence, here's what's going on in the world and what you need to be aware of. And so that was what he was there doing at that time. Interestingly enough, the Pentagon was going through some renovations, and that side, that wedge of the Pentagon where the plane hit, had just been finished, and it was reinforced, and most of the people had been moved out of that area, and they were going to be moving back in. And so in the Pentagon, there were only a couple hundred casualties, which had it hit one of the other wedges, it would have been much worse. There would have been more casualties just from the sheer number of people, plus that wedge had not been reinforced. So it was fortuitous that was where the plane hit, in order to minimize the damage.
Thank you. Thank you, everybody. Would you please join me in thanking Carson again for sharing his story with us. Some of you indicated that maybe you might like to come up and meet Carson, maybe ask him a question if you'd like to do that now, but of course the class is excused now if you need to leave. Thank you so much for coming and for participating.